Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healers specialize in websites for counselors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counselors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Hello and welcome to episode 358 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. I'm Rory and my guest today describes herself as a neurodivergent leadership consultant, a coach, a doctoral research student, and a self-confessed strategic troublemaker. It's my great pleasure to be speaking with Paula Jones about the Horn effect and subcognitive bias, those unconscious processes that can shape how we perceive and respond to neurodivergent individuals, whether they're our clients or the people we meet in everyday life. Together, we'll explore how these subtle biases manifest in professional and social settings and how increasing our awareness can help create fairer, more authentic connections. So with that said, let's roll the intro.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and a very warm welcome to episode 358 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with my colleague Rory Oakes and myself, Ken Kelly, walking you through three topics on today's journey, starting off with that ethical, sustainable practice, where today we're going to be speaking about letting go of the outcome in counselling, the outcome for our clients. Interesting topic, this one. We then go into Practice Matters, which Rory has beautifully teed up, where he spoke with Paula Jones on the Horn effect and autism. Really worth a listen. And then we go into Student Services, where we see you, students, on your formal journey to gain those counselling skills to either become a counsellor, psychotherapist, or to use them within your day-to-day. And today we're going to be speaking about not losing yourself. Don't lose you in counselling training. So we're going to be delving into that. But starting off, Rory, at that ethical, sustainable practice. It keeps us ethical. It keeps us sustainable, this topic. We bring it weekly. And today, letting go of the outcome in counselling. And I guess I might start that by saying, what might be an outcome that we would have to let go of? What is an outcome that a counsellor may hold, Rory?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think the outcome may be in the practitioner's mind. So I think that sometimes, as a supervisor, I've had supervisees who've come to me and said, this person has to get over this trauma, and I'm working towards trying to get this person over this trauma. And I would say to them, well, Are you in danger of making this personal, in that it's become your issue and not the client's? And I think it's best summed up by someone who I have a lot of respect for, a man called John Schlein, who I've spoke about on the podcast before. And there's a book called To Lead an Honourable Life, and in it he outlines his 7 principles. And one of those principles is the client's right to fail in therapy. There you go. I've said it, Ken. The client's right to fail in therapy, because therapeutic journeys are not always an A to B journey. It's not like taking an Uber where you say, I want to go to, I don't know, I want to go to the coffee shop, and you get in at point A and you get out at the coffee shop at point B. counselling, certainly from a client's perspective, and I speak as a client myself, is a very interesting journey. And sometimes the destination you set out to get to isn't the destination you get to. You might find some other way. So if we take it back to the Uber analogy, you get in, you say, I want to go to the coffee shop, and you may end up at the Mall, because that's the nature of self-exploration. Other things come up, other priorities become important, and as awareness raises, the change that's in you may not be taking you to the destination you wanted.
Like it. I love how you've used the Uber analogy there, that you get in with the client and you think that you might be going to one place and you end up going somewhere else. And I guess if we were holding on to that outcome, we'd want to get in the driver's seat and go, no, you're going the wrong way. You need to be going this way because this is the outcome that we're heading towards, which kind of completely overrides that client's autonomy of it being their journey and them holding that responsibility for that journey. We are not responsible for that client and their journey. It is their journey and theirs alone. We get to go with them along that journey. So that's kind of beautifully said, Rory, how of the introduction of what an outcome may be. Now, sometimes we might justify the holding on to the outcome as a counsellor because it was introduced by a client. So I'm going to give an example here, and I'm just making this up. This is not from any case study or any client work, but a client coming in, and then in the first session when you're going through your contracting, the person saying, you know what, I'm here because I really need to repair the relationship with my father. Okay, so there is a presentation and that's a suggested outcome from that person that has come along. Yeah. And then you go into the first session and they might verbalize a lot and tell a lot of stories and bring a lot of context to many, many different parts of their life. And in session 2, they might speak about what happened to them on the way to the session that day and how that is making them feel and what that brings up. And we can be left as the counsellor going, but hold on a second here. Where's your father? He's not featuring in this. You said you're here to sort out the stuff with your father. We've got to get onto the father. I wonder how that relates to your father. Would be a very inappropriate response in this situation. But what I'm trying to do, and maybe I'm maybe cartoonizing this in a way where I'm kind of overdoing it, but I'm trying to show that as soon as we latch on or have an attachment to any form of outcome or direction that we feel the client should be going into, we can inadvertently start driving or kind of hinting at the client moving in that direction. And that's about us. It's about our stuff. It's not the client. The client can come in, say one thing, and then go in a different direction. And I think of an example, Rory, that you may be able to relate to, because I think we see this every now and again in life. And it's when you speak to someone, you speak to a friend or something, and they say, oh, I've fallen out with X person, and they did this, and they said that, and and they really dump on you everything that they're feeling and all of that bitterness. And you can, as an individual, it's pretty natural to think, wow, okay, I see that person in a certain light now. You've painted that for me. And then the next time when you speak to that person, some months later, you go in with the frame of reference of that person being a terrible, bad person as they were painted in the last interaction. And now the person's going, no, I don't even remember that. And we haven't moved on because we get stuck in our frame of reference and our direction, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's wise to remind ourselves that clients are responsible for their own change. We only provide a presence, a therapeutic presence. Now, I know that in some therapies there's more direction. EMDR, cognitive therapies provide more direction, but I think it's generally accepted that clients are responsible for their own change, no matter what modality you work in. And also, I think that growth kind of occurs in unexpected directions. We've all planted things, little trees or maybe grass. I remember when my daughter was young, we got a pot and it was a face and there was hair. The grass was hair, and we used to have a look at it every week, and the hair on the pot would grow, and it looked like the pot face had grown grass hair. But The fun of it was that you never quite knew which direction the grass was going to grow, and that was the whole point of it. Because you weren't a hairstylist, you're observing just this grass growing, and that kind of rather clumsy analogy is a very good one for therapists, because clients grow in unexpected ways and different directions. And here's the thing, Ken: not all progress is visible or immediate. It isn't.
Yes.
So, I know from my training and the therapy I've had that I will get into a situation or an interaction, and I'll walk away, and I might think later on, I dealt with that very differently than I would have done, as a younger man. And it's very difficult to pinpoint that directional turn. Why did that happen? And it's very possible it could have happened in therapy, where I've spoken something which was very difficult for me to speak about. Once it's out in the open, that's released. And that has enabled me to see it for what it is and to make those changes. And I think, one of the things I always used to stick with, and we used to teach this to our students, Ken, is we offer presence, not direction.
Oh, yes.
We are there to offer that space for clients to explore their own reality. It's just so important. And I think I came across a quote by Lisa Ferencz, and she said, if you take credit for your clients' successes, you're also taking responsibility for their challenges. It's a zero-sum game. Because if you say, I'm a great therapist, I've helped my clients, and well, that's great, but you're also taking responsibility for their lives, and we shouldn't really be in that business. We should be in the autonomy business, letting clients develop, like the hair. Coming back to the hair in the pot that we grew, it should go in the direction it wants to go, not the direction you want it to have.
Exactly. And that is the important thing here, the direction you want it to have. And as soon as we have a bias in that direction, are we interfering are we contaminating that client's journey? Of course we are. It is their journey. And if you look to your ethical framework, you're going to see it written in there, with whatever ethical framework you belong to. So we have references here from the BACP ethical framework. Respect for client autonomy is one thing. Avoid imposing the therapist values on the client, and collaboration at the center of the practice, being led by the client. And then NCPS, Code of Ethics, support client agency, same kind of thing, just different wording. So we're seeing it same reflected out there. Maintain non-directive stance, non-directive, not directing it, going with. And I think what it kind of means for me, Rory, when I was thinking about this, it's like mindfulness. Mindfulness suggests present moment awareness. Now, in a session, we are there. It is that present moment, and we are fully 100% present with that client, with what they are saying right now, with what their body is suggesting, with how they are breathing, with a little bit of a buffer knowledge of what they have just brought, so that we can be empathic in that moment and go with that client where they go. And I think if we're in the future, if we're in some agenda-led, we need to get you here. And I say this, of course, with the caveat that if you were doing certain models of therapy, as you've already said, Rory, that's exactly what you would do. If somebody came in and said, I'm scared of flying, got to fly in 7 days, and you were using CBT, you'd only be focusing on the flying and the fear of flying, and you'd be saying, let's get back to that so we can sort this out and give you some ways to get around that. But I'm speaking general therapy, where you're empathically listening. It's very much present moment awareness and where the client leads in that moment. And the buffer that we keep, the memory of that client's journey, is for us to be able to realign with where the client goes next, not for us to direct where the client should be going. I think that is a good way to kind of put that out there. So what does letting go look like in practice, Rory? What do we actually do?
Well, I think the first thing is to understand our own process, and our own process is really important here. And I don't think I mentioned counter-transference or transference for a long time on the podcast. But what can happen is that, the client's issues may raise or stir the sediment in ourselves, and we might identify with the client. We might think the client's journey is our journey, and the way we deal with things isn't the way the client may deal with things. And I think it can be very subtle. Certainly in my own supervision and supervision that I've conducted with supervisees, one of the questions I asked is, does this client resonate with you in any way? And you don't have to scratch the surface too deeply for someone to say, well, actually, the same thing happened to me. And that's where the room illuminates and the supervisee realizes actually they're in their own frame of reference, not the client's. Also, I think there is a pressure to fix, and I'm sure my colleagues in school counselling may. I recognise the scenario that I had many times where the teachers would present a student and say, can you fix this person because their behaviour is terrible in class? Now, my colleagues in teaching, they do a great job, and I completely, as a former lecturer, I completely get it. That, you've got a student who's going through difficulties, but they're disrupting the class and you have a job to do. But as I used to say to them very politely, I think you're mistaking me for a motor mechanic, not a therapist. I said, I haven't got a spanner. I can't fix people. I think eventually that sensibility got driven in, and people realised that therapists don't go around tuning up their clients like a motor mechanic would. And I think the key thing regarding why sometimes therapists want to fix is its attachment patterns. I think that sometimes that what can happen is you can have a client who generates an unmet need in the therapist, and they're trying to please and to make the client happy, like they would as a child, like a child would to a parent who wasn't kindly to them, and that could be quite powerful. And again, that's a question in supervision: who is this client? What's this client to you? And all these, the attachment piece and the identification with the client are all transferences where we're playing out a past relationship in the here and now. And then finally, that's it, isn't it? And also, I think that sometimes, as I used to say, and we used to say, Ken, when we taught, you're responsible to the client, not for the client. Now, there are
100%.
There are some, if you're working in certain areas, that might be a little different. But on a general principle, we're responsible to, not for, because it's the client's life. And that term autonomy is there for a reason, Ken.
Wow. Yeah. It's all there, isn't it? Laid out. And it's very interesting because I'm thinking back to mindset that I might have had as I was going through my studies and how that was adjusted when I went out into practice to being a counsellor. And that was my own journey. So my own journey into recovery from drugs and alcohol took a very specific road that I walked. And there was almost something within me to want to help and reach out to others and guide them and almost say, look, let me show you this way that I have found. This is how you do this. But of course, I very quickly learned that is not effective in any way whatsoever, because each person will find their own way through life, their own way through challenges, and they may differ from a way that worked really well for me. It may not fit for that person at all. They may find a different way, or they may take a different path and not really get there. But there again, it's their journey, and what we learn along those journeys is what is important. As we've already kind of mentioned, so much of the process that happens from therapy is because of that journey. How many times, as a practicing therapist, will a client come in and say, last week when we were talking about X, Y, and Z, it really brought A, B, and C up for me in this last week, and it's almost like that came out of nowhere. Well, that's part of the journey with them leading away, and maybe there's a part of the subconscious that is leading them into certain areas for very good reasons. You know, as you mentioned on so many occasions, Rory, all behavior is goal directed. There's a reason why. The client comes in and says, I'm here to because I want to work on the relationship with my father, and then they kind of don't bring that again. There's a reason. But I guess there's a flip side of this, and I wanted to kind of bring this up and get your thoughts on this, Rory, and it's this. It's the incongruence. So let's say I do have this client, and they do come in, and they do say, you know, I really want to fix the relationship with my father. Is it appropriate at some stage, maybe in our therapy journey, to go, you know, I'm really mindful that as we're doing this review after your third week to see how that is for you, that you actually said as you're coming in that you wanted to look at the relationship with your father. But I'm also looking on that and seeing we haven't really spoken much about your father, and I wonder where you are with that. Is that leading and going back to that outcome, or is that highlighting an incongruence of a client coming and saying, I want to focus on this, yet they don't go there? And I know this is tricky, and I think everyone's answer is going to be unique to their practice, but I'm really keen to hear your thoughts, Rory.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? It really is a tricky one. I think I might, if we come to the 6-week review, I might say, you know, we've talked about this, you've spoken about changing that, and I wonder how that has impacted on what you came in for, which was best relationship with your father. Has that influenced that in any way? And just let it float in the air. And it might be actually, and the something more pressing has come up, and they might go, oh, as you said earlier, oh yeah, well, we're getting on all right now, but actually I'm beginning to realise this. And I think that's the other golden rule of being a therapist, is what the client comes in for may not be what they want to change, or it becomes a emerging awareness in the arc of therapy, in the arc of the relationship. So how many times, Ken, have people come to us as therapists and said, this is what I want to change, and we realise in supervision or in peer discussion that we get halfway through the therapy and actually there's something else that's emerged that's more pressing, that's more pertinent, and they're working on that. And I think part of being a therapist is to kind of name it, bring it into the here and now. So someone asked me, I was speaking to some students a little while ago, and they said, how long does it take to be a therapist? And I said, that's not really the question. It takes you about 3 or 4 years to become a therapist if you go down the one route, perhaps 5 years through another. I said, but it takes a lifetime to become wise in therapy, have wisdom in your practice, and that's ongoing. And I think this is a case in point where wisdom and really sticking to that autonomy, the idea of client autonomy, is so important. Leave our desires out of the room. Really leave them at the door.
Oh, this is a really interesting, I'm enjoying this a lot, Rory. And we've got a super duper handout that covers the topics we're covering now in a lot more depth as well. Gives you key takeaways, kind of explains why letting go helps the clients. We've got kind of what letting go involves and some examples, their case examples. So you can really get that. And I'll give you the address to get that in a moment. But I'm kind of left thinking, you know, when a client is coming in, we've spoken about this before in the podcast, Rory. What they bring us is a narrative. What they bring us is a story. What they bring us is words. But it's not the narrative, the story, the words that brings them in. What brings them in are the feelings that they experience, the emotions that they expose, the pain that they carry around that, the guilt they carry, the shame, whatever it may be that they are carrying. And that's very difficult to word in an outcome, in a, so what are you hoping to get out of therapy? You know, how do you say, well, this deep sickening feeling that I have at the root of my stomach that is kind of there all the time and nagging me, and I don't know why it's really, you know, it's difficult to say that because it doesn't make any sense. It's not tangible. It's easier to go, I think it might be linked into this bit of story here. I think it might be this. And they may present with that, but as the therapy unfolds, they may very well discover other routes and other ways of keying into those emotions that are really underpinning anyway everything. And if we're standing in the way, if we're going, no, hold on, that's not what you said when we came in here. We want to be going down here. I think we're taking away from the client, and that's why I think why letting go is so vitally important, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. We are all authors of our own life. We have our pen and we have our writing pad, metaphorically, and we write our own stories. And, taking the pen off the client and writing a chapter for them isn't really in service. Let the client write their own story. And if they make spelling mistakes, if they block their copybook, as they used to say when I went to school many years ago, great. Let them on that journey, because the whole of our life, from the moment we're born to the moment we disappear off this mortal coil, we are writing our own story. Part of a therapist's job is to sit with the client as they recount and tell their story, and give them the space to be able to rewrite chapters or develop new storylines. And we shouldn't interfere in that. And I also think that what we should do, and it's essential, is trust the client. Trust the client. The client will show us the direction. Not my words. I think that's the words of Carl Rogers. And I think he knew a lot more about it than perhaps I do.
Oh, I don't know, Rory.
Oh, yeah, he definitely does, Ken.
Well, there you go. So there is a handout. It's called Letting Go of the Outcome in Counselling. It is free, and you can get that by going to our website, which is counsellingtutor.com. Click on the podcast tab, because this is from a podcast, and it's right there on the podcast show note page. Now, this is episode 358 podcast, so click on the podcast tab and look for episode 358, or just do a search and put in episode 358, and the site will take you there, and you can download it from that page. And that is today's ethical, sustainable practice, letting go of the outcomes in counselling. Brings us neatly onto Practice Matters. This is where we bring experts in various fields to share what works for them and what they're doing. And today, a really interesting one. You met up with Paula Jones, Rory, speaking about the Horn effect and autism.
Indeed. And it was one of those, all my people I interview, I enjoy interviewing them. But I have to say, with a cup of tea, Paula and myself could have spent all afternoon speaking. A wonderful advocate for neurodivergence, very smart person. And she talks about the Horn effect in therapy. And I think the best way to describe it is, first impressions are not always the impression of someone who is neurodivergent, because we do communicate in different ways, and sometimes making a snap judgment on someone isn't a really good idea. We talked about this, Paula and myself, and this is a snapshot of what she had to say.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you, and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com.
My guest today is Paula Jones, a neurodivergent leadership consultant and coach. And in this conversation, we're going to explore a powerful and overlooked topic, the Horn effect, an unconscious bias where a single perceived negative trait, such as behaviours sometimes associated with autism, can colour our overall impression of a person. So, Paula Jones, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, Rory. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, I was trolling LinkedIn and I saw that you had a post, and I thought, this is really, really interesting. Can you just tell us a little bit about, there's the Horn effect and the halo effect. Can you just tell us what those terms mean?
Yeah, so the horn effect, it's when somebody decides that you're a certain type of person based on one bad impression that they have with you. And then the halo effect is kind of the opposite. And when you attribute the halo effect to lots of people based on one sort of characteristic of one person. So one person with blonde hair, you might assume is kind of angelic, and then attribute that to lots of different people. And then one person with lots of tattoos, which I've got, and facial piercings, which I've got, might be a threat to society and to, all things good. So that would be the horn effect. But within sort of our sphere of neurodivergence, it happens a lot that you can say one thing to somebody or do one thing, and forevermore you are cast as this person that's just wrong. You've just done something wrong. And as autistic or ADHD people, or whatever your flavour of neurodivergence is, you don't know what that thing is, because it's often hard for us to understand what people's intentions are.
Yes.
It's always, well, what have I done? What have I said? And we're never told the answer. So we're forever the black sheep.
Yeah, so it's quite Kafkaesque in that, Kafka was a prisoner in a book who was never told what he'd done wrong, and he spent his life trying to work it out, and eventually became unwell, lost his mind. Can I give you an example of the horn effect from my own experience? You tell me if this looks familiar. So I come out of my house the other day, and we have a new neighbour who lives across the road, never met that person, and they're putting up a CCTV camera with a one of these panels that charge it up, solar panel. And I immediately said to this person I never met, the battery won't charge up because you've got the solar panel facing north.
Yeah.
And instead of south, which is actually correct. And the reception I got perhaps wasn't the one I'd hoped by sharing this information. And I've not met my new neighbour again, but I'm sure she would have formed an opinion of me as someone maybe quite rude, quite brusque, maybe very criticising, when all in my mind I was trying to do was use my knowledge to help her. I'd forgot to do the dance of, you put the camera up, you need to look after your property, and I see you've got a solar panel. Do you know that if you face it that way, you're going to charge the battery up?
So you didn't do all the preamble around it?
No, I'm afraid I wasn't masking.
Yeah, you were just being yourself. Yeah, just being helpful.
Yes.
You were being nice, you were being you, and you were being unmasked.
Yes.
Yeah. We had a similar experience with our neighbours when we were first moving into a place in Harrogate. Now, if your face doesn't fit in a place, in a particular place, that's it. And my husband and I, he's ADHD. He's ADHD, but his ADHD comes out more so than his autism. But we met the next door neighbours, and my husband, trying to make small talk, just said something like, "These are really nice houses, aren't they?" And the neighbour said, "Well, yeah, obviously, or we wouldn't have bought one." And honestly, I think they thought we were the Clampets or something. Do you remember the Beverly Hillbillies?
I do remember the Beverly Hillbillies, yes.
Yeah. And so one day I was going out to work. I was a freelancer at the time. Going out to work, I left the house 6:30 in the morning with my suit on and a briefcase and everything. She happened to come out at the same time, and she said, "You've got a job?" I was like, "Yeah." "What do you do?" She said, "I'm a trainer." And she just looked at me like, how? I was like, do you think I do?
Yeah.
And she, honestly, I thought you were on benefits.
And just to be clear, there's no shame on being on benefits. Some people really need to be on benefits, don't they?
I'm on PIP at the moment.
Yes.
It's settled now. But at the time, it was just like, but so this horn effect, just from one interaction of us trying to make small talk, and then her just like, okay, what did we do? What did we say? What was it? What gave her that impression?
Yes.
And it's just instant. Now, for autistics as well, there's been research done about thin slice judgments, which are just rapid from, I know a lot of people don't like the term neurotypical, but from non-autistic people to autistic people, it's just rapid, chopping, slicing action judgments from things that people say, thin slice judgments. We don't like you because you are different. So that's another kind of route into this, thin slice judgments. And there's been a lot of research done into that. But the Fawn effect is usually it's just one thing, and it can be from somebody that you've known for a long time, and then all of a sudden, the barriers go up, and there we go. You're not liked anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I think a lot of neurodivergent people will have experienced that. Mm-hmm. Certainly, growing up as a child, I can look back and think of times where people would have seen me as odd, or as I got older, of course, they use the term eccentric.
Yeah.
Which is shorthand for you're odd. It's just a nicer word for someone. And it can, in some cases, be damaging to self-esteem. One question I wanted to ask you, said, just to clear up for the listener, your husband's ADUHD. What does that mean? Autistic
and ADHD, and so am I.
Yes.
So that's diagnosed autistic first and then ADHD.
So that's sometimes known as a differential diagnosis, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So I think that's something to be aware of. That I think and here we go. I'm doing what I usually do. Up until 2014, it was thought that you couldn't have, if you're one, you couldn't be the other. Am I right in thinking that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot more ADHD diagnoses now, because it's absolutely true. You can be ADHD and you can experience the paradox that is ADHD, and it's a strange way to be. It's a strange way to live life.
Yes.
It's and I wish I could describe it. It's not even so much that there's a push and pull that you might think that there is, that autism says do this but ADHD says no, do this. It's not even that dichotomy. It's the two of the things are enmeshed with each other, at least in my experience. And I can't put it any better than that. I can't describe it any better than that.
I just had a thought that came to my mind. The best way I could describe it is like listening to jazz music.
Yeah, it's completely discordant. It's totally wild and off its head. Yes.
Yeah. And I like, strangely enough, I like jazz. I listen to jazz. I love jazz. For that reason, because it is unpredictable, and if people listen to music, we'll probably listen to like 4-beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, which all modern music seems to be based on, and yeah, I think that would be a good way of describing it. Neurodivergent people tend to be the jazz players.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a really, really good way of putting it. Yeah, it's very discordant. It clashes. It goes off on its own, does its own thing. Yeah, love it. Great description, that, Rory. Thank you.
So from a kind of perspective of working with professionals, what should and I use the word professionals because I know that we have therapists and supervisors and students listening, but also generally professionals. What kind of potholes do professionals get into when they're working with when the Horn effect appears in their consulting rooms?
Well, we all have our own unconscious biases, so we've got to be aware that we do that because we do this. We all have to admit that we have, confirmation bias, that we might look for things to support our arguments about what we might think of somebody initially. That we all have attribution errors. And so I think giving ourselves a little bit of grace is a good thing. So
Yes.
I think that's something that we should be aware of. And also understanding, especially if we are neurodivergent as well, is being open to the fact that, okay, we're neurodivergent and our clients may be neurodivergent as well. But also just, okay, your client's coming in and are they masking or are they not masking? And having your practice so that it's as open and available to your client as possible. So right down to things like your intake forms. Don't give out standard intake forms to neurodivergent clients, because what works for a non-neurodivergent client is not going to work for an autistic client. So, a Reams long form is useless. So giving them a choice of how they fill it in, what they're filling in. Does a paper form work better? Does an online form work better? The types of questions that you ask them. What makes them feel safe? Ask that question.
Yes.
What makes them feel
Yes. Yeah.
before anything else? What can I do to make you feel okay?
I think that is interestingly enough, I'm going to be interviewing someone else later on today who's going to talk about the difference between a therapist saying, I've got a safe space practice, and what the client thinks is safe.
Yeah, exactly. Because, if you've been on the receiving end of therapy as a neurodivergent practitioner, I'll give you an example. I left my counselling diploma course, my postgraduate course, because one of my tutors, after an observed session, said, "You must be very high functioning." And if in all environments for that to happen, my psychological safety was ripped right from underneath me. You must be very high functioning.
So you must be on the normal side of being neurodivergent. That's the underpin, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Just don't know what it takes for me to turn up.
Yeah.
It's just no. So I left my postgraduate training.
I'm sorry I'm genuinely sorry to hear that, and I think there's a very powerful lesson you give there, Paula, is that the effort it takes to sometimes show up, and we call it spoons, don't we? Sometimes it's referred to as spoons, like your battery going flat, and oh wow, I just don't know what to say. I mean, that it just speaks about ignorance in terms of not understanding the neurodivergent person. A general understanding, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties into the Horn effect as well. Oh, she's all right, or she's, whatever judgment he had about me. Because I don't think he liked me very much, because I'm a bit of a smart ass.
We did mention earlier you came from Manchester originally, so I think possibly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my parents are Mancunian, so my dad was definitely a smart ass.
There you go. It's genetic.
I very much take after my dad. He was definitely autistic.
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
So I take very much after him. So I think he didn't like my smart arsery.
Sorry.
But I think no,
It's brilliant description.
I like to fly the flag for my dad. Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think he made a very, very, very strong judgment about me that stayed for the years that I was at university for my certificate and my postgraduate diploma. So I left halfway through my postgrad diploma in counselling, and yeah, it was just that remark. Oh, you must be very high functioning. I just thought, of all places to say that.
Yes.
That's again the Horn effect taking place there, and it's not a new phenomenon. That Edward Thorndike came up with this in the 1920s, but just looking at the comments on the post that I made, it's so many people are surprised to have a name for it.
Yes.
And it's such a now an old term. It's 100 years old.
Yes.
It's sorry, my dog's just woken up.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, and just so that people might put some context, Edward Thorndike was a psychologist who observed, I think it was officers assessing soldiers, and they would assess them on, I guess, how they presented as opposed to how they actually did their job.
Yeah, he did basically time and motion studies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's who had to blame for all the time and motion studies that were done in the 60s. Because they were all based on his, in the 50s and 60s, because they were all based on his model. But yeah, he's sorry, the light's going off. He was the person that brought all of those about, and people are only just realizing now. I think he's sort of fell out of favor a little bit, but it's such an important term because it speaks to us as neurodivergent people so fluently that, it's something that everybody does. You get it in job interviews. It's not where the thin slice judgments come in, where people realise they dislike you straight away, therefore they're going to be, chucking you out of the running straight away. But they're going to have this pervasive feeling about you. And it might not be dislike, but it might be you're incompetent for some reason. You might be just any other sort of negative effect that they can have about you. It's just going to be all pervasive. It's going to be there hanging over you in an interview. And it's really hard for us to overcome because we cannot overcome it as autistic people or ADHD people. It's just there all the time. Nothing we can do can turn that around.
Yeah.
We'll always be the person that does X.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And I'll give you an example of that from my own childhood or younger, as a younger man. I applied for huge amounts of jobs, but I can't write properly. So if I write, it looks like a spider's probably got a bit unwell, crawled across into an ink, and then staggered across the paper. The times I've got halfway through application forms and I've just given up.
Yeah.
And I've just, you asked me, and it's very different. In fact, someone actually said to me, when you speak, you're a lot more intelligent than when you write. And I said, well, as you're going to employ me for speaking, it's probably good. Probably wouldn't want to employ me to be a writer, would you? Well, that's the kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it can be devastating. So, what we've come up with at the moment is making sure that you're really giving choice to clients. That when you first meet them, you're saying, how shall we progress? Are you okay with a written form, or could we do it? Could we meet up and have a talk about it, or that type of thing? As we come to the end of this, it's been a fascinating interview. I think it's been really fascinating, both lived experience and professional observation. What observations, never say advice, what observations would you give to therapists who are listening to this and thinking, what do I need to do now?
I would say that you need to listen to professionals. I mean, I know you've just said professionals, but there are other professionals out there who are saying that they are exhausted. They are bullied for being themselves in the workplace. Psychologists, psychotherapists, etc. are bullied for being themselves in the workplace because they're like you and me. And if they're employed by bigger organisations, then that can't happen. It just can't happen. Then you've got clients coming to these organisations who are not being given the grace to be themselves either. And they may not be neurodivergent either, but they're not being given safe spaces. Every client needs a safe space. Not just us, it's not just about us. Every client needs to be given grace to be not prejudged or not judged on, you said that, therefore I'm going to be thinking this about you forever. And I think that happens in coaching and therapeutic spaces far more than we'd like to admit, because people are coming to us when they're at the most vulnerable. And surely we should be more open and not picking people apart at that point, and taking notes and spotting patterns. And that's where I think autistic therapists and coaches are not necessarily better, but have a good good grasp on things, because we can spot patterns. Yes. So we see, okay, this person has said this, and then down the line they've said this, and that hooks into that. So there's a pattern there and there and there, and that means X, Y, Z. So, this is not a character trait, this is a behavior pattern, that sort of thing. So maybe that gives us a bit of an advantage. But I think a lot of people are being perhaps punished a little bit where they need not be. And I think the spaces need to be safer. And I'm not bashing therapists here. I think what I'm doing is the bigger corporations that are creating online coaching spaces where you can go and pick a therapist and, those sorts of things. They're not safe, I don't think. I think they lead to judgment situations that are not right. And I'm trying not to give away what I think about who I think.
Yes. Well, I think that with that heartfelt observation at the end of our interview, certainly given me, and I'm sure those who listen, lots of food for thought. So, Paula Jones, thank you so much for joining us.
Massive thank you to Paula Jones. Thank you to you again, Roy, for holding those all-important topics. This one really resonates with me, and I'll tell you why. It was only yesterday that Rory and I found ourselves in a meeting with our current CEO of Counselling Tutor, and we were having a CEO report of what was going on in the business. And I stopped at a stage, Rory, and I said, I hope what I'm saying is okay, because the way I talk, often afterwards I will sit and think about it and think, I was far too direct there. Maybe I was too brash there. And this is like deconstructing it afterwards. And that's part of my neurodivergent brain does that all the time. And then I think, could I have done that differently? It's a terrible waste of time and not a healthy place to spend my time. But it certainly does play out for me. So I kind of voiced that within that, but that's the only way I know how to communicate, and it is so different to other people. And I've lost good friends, and I've lost professional relationships over that, Rory, because it's just who I am. I don't mean anything. In fact, if I mean anything by it, it is always with a kind and good intention for the other person or the outcome of a greater means or something. But anyway, I'm really grateful that you reached out to have that chat with Paula. Very grateful.
Absolutely, Ken. And there's something else here. She's going to make a lecture for the Counsellor CPD Library on the Horn Effect. So
I'm so glad.
Watch out for that, because it's so important. And as at the top of the podcast, where I outline my, shall we say, directness, it can happen. You start off, as a neurodivergent person, trying to be helpful and in service to someone, but because you don't do the social dance, it comes across maybe as criticism or being uncaring. I think it's a burden, and I use the term deliberately, that I think neurodivergent people carry, if I'm honest.
Yeah, definitely. So you can expect, if you're a member of our library for qualified practitioners, you can expect that lecture to show. And if you do our Autism Informed Practice course, I guess you'll be putting that CPD lecture into there as well, because we have a bank of resources to build that out. So you can find out more about that all at counsellingtutor.com. But we now move into Student Services. Student Services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Can't tell you how many times Rory and I have heard counselling students say that learning skills and knowing that they're using them effectively is really, really challenging. The reason for this is because we don't get to see another counsellor using skills in a real live session. In reality, this means that we're asked to learn something that we can never see demonstrated in a real setting, and it's no wonder that many of us are left feeling unsure. If you want to see counselling skills used in real sessions by qualified therapists, so this is real sessions, real presentations, and real use of skills, then go to counsellingskillsacademy.com. There's some free videos on skills, including a full live session that you can have a look at. Gain the competence and the confidence of knowing you're using your counselling skills effectively. Just visit counsellingskillsacademy.com. And today in Student Services, we're speaking about don't lose you in counselling training. Now, I know this happens a lot. I think if I look back to my own training, it probably there were parts of that journey where I wasn't quite sure what was going on with myself. But what does this look like? What do we mean, Rory, by don't you lose you in counselling training?
What it looks like is at the end of a class, a student sidles up to you and says, "Can I have a word, Rory?" And you go, yeah. And they say, is what you're teaching a kind of religion? And you go, "No, I'm teaching a psychological theory." Well, it feels like a religion. It feels like a very special grouping of people with a distinct view of the world. And I think, and I've thought about this a lot, in counselling training, because we don't speak in society in general, getting better now, but certainly not in general, about emotion, about relationships, about authenticity, it can become a little bit intoxicating for people who train. And as a consequence of that, and I speak for myself here, the consequence for me training was I actually changed. And I became maybe a little bit too right on, a little bit too invested in having a process conversation with everybody I met, because I was going through an incredible change myself. I was metamorphizing to be a different version of myself. And people noticed it. And I think that what can happen is that we lose the essence of ourselves. We can lose who we are. The idea that counselling training is about changing our outlook on life and the way we communicate and the way of being that we adopt doesn't mean that we have to scrap the entire person we were before we went in. I think it's a case of updating the program, as they say in computer sciences. But it's an interesting conversation because it had come up in our Facebook group. And if you want to join our Facebook group, go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor, yada yada, and you'll be in. But yeah, it took me a long time to reintegrate who I was with who I'd become. And I think that speaks to distance from the training and the intensity of it, and letting the sediment settle, as my father used to say. Let's let the sediment settle. In other words, just let everything just calm down a little bit and see where we are.
Yeah. This is a very interesting topic, and I gave it some deep thought yesterday. I was thinking about what it means to me. There's a beautiful story about one of the famous artists, and I'm not the scholar in art, so I don't remember who said it, but it goes along the lines of that the beautiful marble statue already exists within the block of marble. You just got to take the bits that don't form the statue away, all the bits that don't, and then you're left with the core. And that's an interesting one, because this topic is don't lose you in counselling training. And I like how you've framed it, because you can look at all of this and go, there's something wrong with me. I shouldn't be this way. I need to be different. Now that's different to recognizing that you are experiencing changes within your training, within yourself. Changes that are not necessarily always pleasant and uplifting. They can be hard and they can be challenging. But I think of that as more of taking away the bits that are not you than actually losing yourself, leaving the true you that underpins all of this. When we take away the introjected values, when we see through the illusion, when we realize that our frame of reference is just a single truth that is true for us, and it can be completely different for the person who sits opposite us. Realizing that, waking up to that, I think is more discovering the true you if you embrace it in the right way. I wonder what your thoughts are on that, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Ken, that it takes a long time to work out the bits you want to remove, if you like, and modify, and those you want to keep. And I think sometimes, and I'll speak for myself here, it was easier to adopt a whole new way of being. Because, to be quite frank, I thought who I wasn't really good enough. And it took me a long, long time to realize there was a huge amount of me, which was okay. It was okay. And the amount that I changed wasn't because I was a bad person or that I was uneducated. It was that the training had enhanced the person I am. And I was. It just enhanced it. And once I kind of grasped that, my life became better, and certainly became better for the people around me. who would say, really dear friends, long-time friends would say, Rory, you're a bit serious. You're becoming a bit serious, and I don't want a deep and meaningful conversation about everything. And it was about just switching that process side off. I was saying to someone last night, I went out for something to eat with my wife, and I was saying to someone that I now look through my glasses, if you like, not the ones I wear, but my philosophical glasses, are that of a therapist. I see every interaction partly through that of a therapist, because that's my frame of reference now. All behaviour, as you say, is goal directed. But sometimes it's useful just to put that in suspension and just have a bit of a laugh.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah, just have a bit of a laugh and say, all right, okay, you think like that. And one of the things that really helped me, Ken, was a Sufi poet called Rumi, who wrote a wonderful, Rumi, I'm sure you do. And he wrote this, and it's a paraphrase probably, but he said, out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field, and I'll meet you there. I think it's a metaphor for any conversation we should have in our lives.
Wow. The bit that was the key there, Rory, is when you shared through your own training that there was a moment of, I need to change because I'm not happy with who I am. I don't feel good enough. And I think that's what this topic is about today, is if you're looking at it that way, if it feels that way for you, you're a student and that's how it feels right now. I think it's a natural feeling when we start to learn the theory and we start to learn how we ourselves have developed and what may have layered into making us who we are, to have that feeling of, I should be different, it could be different, I would like to be more like the tutor, more like that person in the class, and how and the truth of all of this is that what makes you uniquely you and will go with you and be the most unique thing and the biggest asset you have in your counselling career is that you are you, and that you've had the experiences that you have had. You are good enough. And, this is what we're doing for clients. We're welcoming clients to say the real you is good enough. So if you are feeling that way, it can be natural. And I think you said it earlier, Rory, with how long does it take to become a counsellor? Well, you can train to become a counsellor in 5 years, but it takes a lifetime to build the wisdom, the applied wisdom. And that's why, as counsellors and psychotherapists, personal development's not something we just do when we're training. It never stops. We're called upon to do personal development in our ethical framework. Why? Because we are always developing and training, but we're not becoming a different person. We're finding more of our true self, which is good enough. You listening to this right now are good enough.
Absolutely, wow. Ken. And just to get a different perspective on that, we're joined by Sarah Henry, our training correspondent, and she talks a lot about that. So over to you, Sarah. So welcome back, Sarah. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I mean, rude health, as they say in my part of the world. I don't know what rude health is, but if there is such a thing, I'm it. So, Ken and myself were talking about not losing the you in counselling training, and I think it can be so easy. What do you think? What do you think prompts people to kind of get lost when they train?
I genuinely think that it's the desire to be good and to get it right. I think that students come in with best intentions and with a lot of passion and hope. Yeah. And sometimes there is such vulnerability in worrying about getting it wrong and worrying about the harm that they could potentially cause, that there ends up being a kind of, well, from my point of view with the training that I deliver, a kind of person-centered corset that is incredibly tight, and students lose their sense of self because they believe that there's something that they should be or they must be versus who they actually are. So I think 9 times out of 10 it happens with good intention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of the reasons why, therapy is so important when people are undertaking counselling training, because it's easy to become unpacked or a bit too tightly wrapped, as you say. And it can be quite, I mean, you know, my own training, it was a revelation. It was a world that I had no idea about. When I went into it, it was magical and marvellous, and still remains so 20 odd years from being a student. But it is a sense that, you know, where is the you in it, the I? And and I also, I've been polishing this theory for a few years now, so I'm going to bring it out. I think that certainly training in person-centred theory can feel a little evangelical. Not that there's anything wrong with being an evangelicalist, but it does sometimes feel more of a religion than it does a psychological theory, doesn't it?
Yes, I've said it in my classroom, is, you know, this kind of cult idea of taking a phrase such as "it's a way of being" and using it to just totally suppress oneself, to beat oneself up if there's any sense of having an emotion other than that which is virtuous and nice and kind and everything is okay, which to me is wild. Is, you know, this idea that as a person-centered therapist or trainee, you're not allowed to have any edges. You're not allowed to have anything that is remotely outside of the idea of the caricature of a therapist. And I see it happening, and I see students almost creating conditions of worth in the classroom while we're debunking the very same theory. And I watch that those conditions of worth give the illusion of safety and security for students. But yeah, the kind of, I can't do this and I can't do that. Why? Well, because it's not in line with the way of being. It's an interesting watch from a tutor perspective, and one that I challenge for students in the classroom.
Yeah, and also I think there's so many voices. You know, there's voices on podcasts like ours. There's voices in books. You know, if you go onto social media sites, everybody has a different take on what a therapist should be. I read some very, shall we say, interesting posts where people kind of prescribe exactly what a therapist should be.
Yes.
And I think, well, good grief, that isn't how I am. And to be frank, no one I know. And I think that, and I'm using the word think now purposely, not feel, think. I think that thinking is a good idea as well. I think we can get lost in process and just become a walking process machine, as opposed to moving more into the cognitive and just thinking. It's a tricky one, and I think that students sometimes need a bit of guidance on that, or a check and correct, as we say in teaching.
Yeah, and some modelling. I try my best as a tutor, because I believe that that's the commitment that I have to my students, to model the very thing that they are wanting to learn how to embody. So while there's no visual to this podcast, I, as a person, have brightly coloured rainbow nails. That's authentically who I am. And while I could pick a nail varnish setup that is more quote unquote sensible and professional, it's kind of challenging those ideas of, okay, well, why can't I do this if this is who I am? Why can't I wear a jumper that I'm comfortable in rather than a cardigan that is itchy? Why is it that I believe I can't be who I authentically am? And there's a fine line between being authentic and kind of reckless and cavalier. And I think that's the line to be taught, not this is who you should be, but where does the appropriateness of who you are out there become inappropriate as you try and integrate in the relationship that you're in. So the new configuration of who you are as a therapist needs to emerge, but let it emerge from the starting point of who you are, not the idea of I must be Carl Rogers 2.0.
Yeah, absolutely. And reckless and cavalier, What examples could you give of reckless and cavalier, Sarah?
Do you want one today?
Yes, yeah, let's go down that rabbit hole.
I'm wearing a jumper today that I would say is authentic to and again, you can't see it. I might take a picture of it and put it on my social media if you want to find me on Instagram at the Race Trainer. But it's a jumper that I believe is very true to who I am as a person. And it says right on the front of it, don't worry about silly expletive.
Yes.
This is a jumper that is incredibly true to my character. I love it. It's colourful, it's pink, and it's who I am. To me, it would be reckless and cavalier for me to wear this in a therapy session.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe that I should be the person who is initiating swearing in the therapy space. I kind of follow the lead of my clients. But also the message about this would be somewhat dismissive and judgmental when it came to my clients who might believe that they are sweating the small stuff and worrying about small things. So for me, this would be an example of being kind of cavalier and not actually considering the relationship that I'm going into while wanting to bring my authentic self. It's not that I believe I need to be something else, but this version of me isn't what would be appropriate to integrate in the relationship because I'm bringing forth my stuff. This jumper is my stuff. And in doing that, what I might do is hinder a number of the necessary and sufficient conditions, potentially kind of drop kick condition 6 out of the park when it comes to the client being able to receive my empathy and UPR, because I'm giving the message that potentially what they're worrying about is small stuff and I'm telling them not to. So as a live example, that's one that kind of bear in mind. I've got no clients today. I'm with you, Rory. So this works.
Absolutely. And I think that, in training, demonstrating, who you are, the reality of who you are. And I know that, obviously this is a podcast, so you can't see the video, but you're a black woman. So, so your way of being and my way of being are formed by different experiences, both societal and our own kind of intrinsic sense of who we are, we're as individual as we are. And I do think sometimes that in Rogerian therapy there is a bit of, I have to be like Carl Rogers. Something bizarrely, I think that Carl Rogers said, no, don't be like me, be like you.
Yep. And I would add to that I think actually that it's sometimes the idea of Carl Rogers. It's not because there's been any videos that have been watched or any literature that's been read. Yeah. It's because people have seen other programs where there's a therapist who gets someone to lay on a chaise longue and they've got a clipboard and a cardigan and glasses and they're looking very earnestly while sighing. And it's like, right, okay, well, that's what a therapist is. So that's what I must do. And it can become a condition of worth in itself. And if what it is that you're trying to do is offer an authentic person for the client to be in a relationship with, then that's the first hurdle that is being kind of run into it. You're not even falling over it, you're just kind of bashing straight into it. So for listeners, have a think about how much freedom you give yourself to be authentic in the relationship with your clients. And do you understand authenticity? Because on one side there's a condition of worth that you might be holding yourself hostage to, and on the other side might be the misunderstanding of being cavalier and just doing anything that you want. There's a sweet spot in the middle, and the learning environment is the playground to find that. Yeah,
I also think supervision and personal therapy are kind of the boundaried walls that kind of help you set this new way of being. Because for a lot of people, the training itself, and we always say, and we drive this home at every opportunity, that training isn't therapy. But the truth of the matter is, there is a therapeutic element to it, and people may feel freer than they've ever felt, and that needs to be taken somewhere.
Taken somewhere where it can be appropriately held and explored, in a relationship that doesn't include assessment and observation and peers' opinions, and the different relationships that are set up, especially to support the diploma level training and beyond, where for me there's kind of the triangle of the work that students do with their clients, the work that they will do in the classroom, the work that they will do in supervision, it's more of a square actually, and the work that they do in the training space. There's lots of different ways to process the same thing, and the end result can really shine a light on authenticity and the growth that happens from one year to another.
Yeah, so I guess if there's a message we should leave, it's you've got to be yourself, you can't be no one else. And for the eagle-eared listener, they're probably going to break out into an Oasis song now. But
and I'll give a Taylor Swift reference, which is I'm the only one of me. So there we go, Rory. Is you are an Oasis fan, I am a Taylor Swift fan, and authentically we can offer that, but we probably couldn't give what each other did in that moment.
Well, I think what we'll do is I'll acquiesce and hand it back to Ken in the studio.
Massive thank you. Love hearing from Sarah Henry. Great topic, Rory. Thank you for bringing it today. Don't lose you in counselling training. That has been our student services. And this has been episode 358 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast.
Yes, we started off with ethical, sustainable practice, letting go of outcomes in therapy, speaking to autonomy and allowing the client to write their own stories. In Practice Matters, I spoke with the wonderful Paula Jones about the Horn effect and autism. I think that anybody in practice should listen to this interview. It is very, very telling, and a reminder that, of course, we're going to have a lecture from Paula, who's going to do a lecture that you can watch, and it will be included in our autism course as a bonus lecture. And in student services, don't lose yourself in counselling training. A response to a Facebook page, and of course the thoughts from our wonderful external correspondent, Sarah Henry, who is a trainer and therapist. Thank you so much for your likes, subscribes and shares. They mean the world to me and Ken. And until the next time we meet, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.